What if I told you that the biblical Judas wasn't a villain but a tragic hero in the life of Jesus? Today, you will discover an authentic historical source that presents biblical events from a completely different perspective, a source that shook the foundations of the religious world. Imagine it is 1978, in Egypt, near Nag Hammadi. An Egyptian farmer enters one of the local caves previously used as burial sites. Inside, he finds a type of ossuary, a bone box. Hoping to find gold or other treasures, he opens it. However, instead of riches, he discovers something entirely different, a leather-bound ancient book tied with a strap. Little did he know that no amount of gold could equal the value of this discovery. He had stumbled upon a book condemned as heresy nearly 1,900 years earlier. Though it sounds like the plot of an adventure movie, this story is entirely true. I assume some listeners might feel anger or similar emotions at certain points in this episode. I strongly encourage you to reflect on where exactly such emotions come from. First, let's establish some facts. This episode does not aim to question or challenge anything, nor is it intended as provocation. It is merely a presentation of facts that I find extremely intriguing. I use the term facts because the apocryphal text I will discuss today truly exists. It is neither a fabrication nor a legend. In this episode, I will present the content of the Gospel of Judas, drawing on sources provided in the description of this video. I will pose questions, leaving the answers up to you. Regardless of what you believe or which religion is close to your heart, I think it is worth being aware of the existence of such texts. Turning away and pretending they don't exist is not the behavior of someone with strong faith. Consuming only pleasant and comfortable content while rejecting uncomfortable and challenging material has nothing to do with genuine growth, which often occurs through discomfort. When we stay within our own informational bubble, no development takes place. Keep your mind open. I must also mention one more thing. The very name of this apocryphal text, the Gospel of Judas, evokes discomfort in many people because it pairs the term gospel, which conjures thoughts of the good news, with the name of the apostle who betrayed Jesus. Did you know that when the Church canonized the 4 Gospels found in the Bible today, it rejected dozens of others as uninspired? Within the context of the Bible and Christian tradition, Judas was merely a tool in the hands of God to fulfill Jesus' earthly mission. Without his traitorous kiss, there would have been no salvific crucifixion, and therefore, no resurrection, the central events in human history according to Christians. If Judas's actions were predetermined by a divine plan, can he truly be labeled a villain? How does his predestined fate differ from the tragic fates of heroes in ancient tragedies? This is a theme the Gospel of Judas itself explores, so let's return to our story. The Egyptian farmer who found the book sold it to an antiquities dealer in Cairo. This dealer was later robbed, with the leather-bound text among the stolen items. Eventually, the stolen goods were recovered, and the dealer organized an auction in Geneva, Switzerland, aiming to sell the manuscript for the highest possible price. It wasn't until 5 years after the farmer's discovery that the manuscript's true nature was identified. This identification was made by Professor Stephen Emmel, a prominent scholar of Coptic writings. However, the initial asking price for the book was an astronomical $3 million, which prevented its sale. The dealer, undeterred, took the book to New York, but even there, he failed to find a buyer. Eventually, he stored it in a bank safe deposit box, where it would remain for nearly 16 years. In 1999, Frida Chakos, a collector and expert in antiquities, purchased the Gospel of Judas from the dealer for $300,000. Sadly, the manuscript's long storage under poor conditions had worsened its already fragile state. Its pages began to crack and crumble. The Gospel of Judas became a turning point in Frida's life. She made an intriguing statement that sheds new light on the manuscript. Judas was cursed for thousands of years. And I have the gospel that says he didn't want to betray Jesus. He was asked to do it. I feel it is my mission to rehabilitate him. To honor her father's name, Frida Chacos named the manuscript the Codex Chacos. In addition to the Gospel of Judas, it contains 3 other apocryphal texts, including the letter of Peter to Philip. Efforts to reconstruct the damaged manuscript began and lasted until 2006. The book was eventually returned to Geneva, where it was translated and published. Keep in mind, this happened less than 20 years ago, making it a relatively recent discovery in the study of ancient texts. To fully understand the context of this discovery, you need to know that scholars of ancient texts were already aware that such a document existed more than 1,000 years before its rediscovery. Its existence had been documented in early writings, making its discovery electrifying but not entirely unexpected. For example, Bishop Irenaeus of Lyons mentioned it in his work Adversus Heresus. This same bishop was responsible for establishing the canon of the 4 Gospels now recognized by the Church. Unfortunately, Irenaeus's mentions of the Gospel of Judas in his writings were limited to just 3 brief references, which meant that until the 21st century, we had only a vague idea of its content. Before the manuscript's publication, extensive research was conducted to verify its authenticity. This included radiocarbon dating, which confirmed that the text dates back to the 3rd or 4th century AD, ruling out the possibility of forgery. Analysis of the handwriting produced similar results. There is no doubt that this is an authentic ancient text from the early Christian era. Who wrote the Gospel of Judas? To answer this question, it is important to understand that the names associated with all Gospels, including those in the Bible, are not literal. For instance, the Gospel of John was not written by John himself, as he was a simple fisherman who likely could neither read nor write. Such skills were not widespread and were typically reserved for the wealthy. It is therefore clear that Judas himself was not the author of the Gospel of Judas. So, who was? Initially, it was believed that the authors were the Cainites, a Gnostic religious group from the Roman Empire. However, contemporary scholars now lean toward the Sethians, another Gnostic group whose works often center on Adam's 3rd son, Seth. Let me explain who the Gnostics were and what Gnosticism is. Gnostics were an ancient group that believed salvation could be achieved through knowledge. For them, knowledge was a tool for self-redemption. Gnostic mythology portrays humanity as being in a state of sleep, and awakening from this sleep is synonymous with discovering the truth about one's spiritual calling. This was not knowledge in the conventional sense, such as academic or textbook knowledge. It referred to a mysterious, mystical understanding of oneself, the world, and spirituality. To someone firmly rooted in the conservative framework of Christianity, this might seem like heresy, and I understand that perspective. However, the Gospel of Judas is not the only early Christian text to draw heavily from Gnosticism. In fact, even canonical Gospels, such as the Gospel of John, contain elements attributed to Gnostics. We are beginning to see parallels between texts accepted and rejected by the Church. Let's now delve into the content of the Gospel of Judas. It describes the beginning of Jesus' ministry, his selection of the apostles, and the final days and hours before his arrest. Most of the text consists of dialogues, such as those between Jesus and the apostles, with narrative sections being less common. In this apocryphal text, Judas is not portrayed as a traitor or villain. Instead, the content reveals him as someone who hands Jesus over to the soldiers at Jesus' explicit request. This was a necessary condition for fulfilling the divine plan of salvation. Judas is depicted as a tool for a higher purpose. The book portrays Judas in a radically different light than what is traditionally accepted in Christianity. One could even argue that he is depicted as a positive figure. When you think about it, doesn't that make sense? The Polish translation of the Gospel of Judas was prepared by Father Professor Vincenta Missa, and I will use his version here. In the text, Jesus first selects all 12 apostles, then turns to Judas and says, "Separate yourself from them, and I will tell you the mysteries of the kingdom." He chooses Judas from among the 12 and invites him to a closer understanding of the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven. Judas, in turn, is the first of the apostles to realize who Jesus truly is, as revealed in the passage, "I know who you are and from which place you have come. You have come from the eon of the immortal Barbelo and from the one who sent you. I am not worthy to utter his name." Barbelo is a term frequently appearing in apocryphal Gospels and refers to a Gnostic, divine feminine force. One of the most electrifying passages in the Gospel of Judas occurs when Judas says to Jesus, "Master, I had a vision. I saw myself, and the disciples were stoning me." Jesus responds, "You will be cursed by the others. The gates of the kingdom of heaven will stand open for you. But first, you will suffer greatly. You will be greater than all others. Judas, you will sacrifice the man that clothes me." This passage seems to fill a missing piece of the story we all know, radically altering its tone. Notice that Jesus does not say, "You will sacrifice the man I am," but rather, "the man that clothes me." Gnostics believed the body to be a vessel that hindered consciousness from achieving salvation. In this text, there is no mention of resurrection as it is traditionally understood. Instead, it is implied that resurrection occurred naturally through Jesus abandoning his earthly, human form. Father Missa, the translator, wrote, "Judas contributed to salvation by bringing about the death of Christ." Salvation was accelerated by Jesus' premature death. Deliverance from death offered no opportunity for salvation. Its delay also delayed salvation. Let's now turn to the Gospel of Matthew, one of the 4 canonical Gospels recognized by the Church. While Judas is commonly associated with treachery, greed, and villainy, there is a passage that reveals how deeply he regretted his actions. Overwhelmed by guilt, he took his own life in despair. Then Judas, who had betrayed him, seeing that Jesus was condemned, repented and returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders. He said, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." But they said, "What is that to us? You bear the responsibility." Then he threw down the pieces of silver in the temple, and departed, and he went and hanged himself. The Gospel of John also provides a fascinating and challenging passage to interpret. During the Last Supper, Jesus says to Judas, "What you are going to do quickly." In the original Greek, this phrase can be interpreted in 2 ways. The first suggests that Jesus refers to Judas's free will, what you want or intend to do. The second interpretation suggests inevitability, what you must or are required to do. The latter implies that Jesus was encouraging Judas to carry out the plan without delay, framing his actions as part of a divine necessity. This interpretation dramatically changes the perspective. Instead of outright betrayal, we see the unfolding of a divine mystery of salvation. This raises the fundamental question, was Judas a traitor, or was he a faithful servant of Jesus who sacrificed everything for a higher cause? It's also worth noting that none of the canonical Gospels explicitly state Judas's motive for betraying Jesus. Why would he do it? What was his reasoning? The 30 pieces of silver he received were worth, at most, the equivalent of several thousand modern dollars, a trivial price for betraying a man, especially one as politically inconvenient as Jesus. Furthermore, Judas returned the money after realizing the weight of his actions, which makes financial motives even less plausible. Like the other apostles, Judas had left behind his possessions and followed Jesus, placing great trust and hope in him. Consider the double standards in how the apostles are judged. Judas is unequivocally condemned as a scoundrel and a traitor. Why, then, is Peter excused for his threefold denial of Jesus, an act of fear and cowardice? Was Judas an entirely evil figure? A tragic character? Or perhaps even a positive one? I would love to hear your thoughts. Share your opinion in the comments, and let's discuss. I can't help but wonder, imagine, for a moment, a different reality. What if Bishop Irenaeus of Lyons had made a different choice and included the Gospel of Judas in the canon of Scripture? Perhaps from childhood, we would have learned about Judas in religion classes as a hero who carried out an incredibly difficult task at Jesus' request. A man who acted against his own nature to achieve something monumental but who ultimately could not bear the psychological burden of his actions. This is just a thought experiment, but I encourage you to read the Gospel of Judas for yourself. It is accessible to everyone. Perhaps forming your own opinion is better than relying on the judgments of someone who, nearly 2,000 years ago, decided which sources were acceptable and which should be condemned. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope you found this material, though somewhat different, interesting and thought-provoking. If you did, please subscribe to my channel and check out the other videos I create to inspire personal growth. I wish you a blessed day.